Wait, don't click off yet. Let me explain. I really enjoy Fat Albert. Wait, hold on. I'm aware of Bill Cosby and how horrible of a human being he is. And I'm aware separating the art from the artist can only go so far for some people. But Fat Albert is a special phenomenon that I really want to talk about. Most people are only vaguely aware of it as a real chubby kid hanging out with his pals in the junkyard. But a lot of the topics Fat Albert discussed were really shocking. Like with this episode, the mainstream. So there's this new kid in class, right? And the teacher introduces him to the class, but he doesn't really say anything. It's clear that there's something off about him, and not just the fact that he looks like he's half the age of the other students. The teacher pulls Fat Albert to the side after class because Fat Albert is this all-knowing saint for some fucking reason, and starts to explain that there's something off about the new kid Dennis. She tries to dance around it, calling him things such as atypical or mentally handicapped. Now old Albert isn't getting the message, so she finally cuts the pretenses and just straight up calls him the gamer word.
That's cause Jesus Christ is...
No, stop! Not that one. The other one.
How do I say this without being offensive?
So now we have an episode talking about special needs children in education during a time where special needs programs were only just starting to become a thing in low-income neighborhoods, considering this episode came out in 1979. Now there's a lot that could be said about things like the education system allowing a kid like Dennis, who clearly has some type of ADHD or autism, to be in the same class as neurotypicals without any sort of accommodations. But honestly, the episode treats the subject fairly tastefully and realistically. There's more than a few pieces of media out there that try to paint neurodivergence as some kind of superhero, or a magical existence, or the next stage of human evolution. And that's a bold-faced lie. Speaking as an autismo, it can be fucking great. It can also be fucking miserable. But Fat Albert treats the subject in a very wholesome, human way. For one, they don't exaggerate Dennis's condition. They don't bother putting him in a helmet or making him struggle to speak. He's just a little awkward, a little slow to respond, and needs more clearly defined instructions to get things done. Like when Fat Albert tries to have him help the gang out by oiling up their new basketball hoop, because there wasn't a clear indicator of when he was supposed to stop, Dennis just oiled up the whole thing rather than the part that Fat Albert wanted him to. For another, they don't shy away from the fact that Dennis's condition is in fact some form of a disability, and it does hamper him in some way. Time and again they say that Dennis can do almost anything that anybody else can do, he's just a little bit slower about it. There is no pretending that his condition is just a descriptor and that he can function just like anybody else. He needs time, care, and patience to help him in his development. The way he's treated by other students is also portrayed fairly realistically. We've got guys like Fat Albert who try to be as patient with Dennis as he can.
Dennis is only part two. You can do almost anything any of us can do. Maybe some things you can even do better. I mean it. The only difference is that it takes you just a little longer.
But we've also got guys like Rudy who treat him like garbage before learning their lesson, making fun of him any chance that they can get.
You mean good old triple threat? Triple threat. Mumble, stumble, and fumble.
They also make sure to highlight that the things that Dennis actually excels at better than others. It may take him longer to process things, but he's also a really creative type who wins the class's art contest with his painting, showing that while he may struggle with interaction or he may struggle with classwork, he is a savant when it comes to the arts, which is a weird thing to say, but it's a typical thing that comes with neurodivergence. Now the last thing to talk about is, yes, they do use the R slur when describing Dennis. And part of that is shocking because the idea of a kids show, because remember Fat Albert is a kids show from back in the day, using this type of language is surprising. These are the words that you would expect to hear out of Rick and Morty or South Park in an attempt to be edgy in saying the things that they shouldn't be saying. So the fact that they're using this term so earnestly comes as a shock. But here's the thing to remember, this came out in 1979. As unfortunate as it is to say, that word was the clinical term for mental disabilities back in the day. The term neurodivergent or neurodiversity didn't hit the mainstream, pun not intended, until the 90s, the late 90s even. And that word, ironically, was still being used in medical professions until the 2010s. Like, certain individual groups may have changed their names in order to become more politically correct at the time, but the word didn't become an official slur until maybe 15 years ago. We can be shocked at the usage of these words. You can absolutely find it surprising that Fat Albert, of all things, is using this language, but then we also have to remember the context in which the language is being used. Again, remember, this episode came out in 1979. That word just wasn't considered a slur at the time. Surely it was used to insult people, but it was also a clinical term. And unfortunately, that didn't change until years and years later, and it wasn't until years and years later where we had a different term come up so that way we can properly define people who are special needs. Now, when initially watching the episode, it would seem like the biggest takeaway from it is that Fat Albert dared to say what back then was a clinical term, but what nowadays is considered a harsh slur against neurodivergence. But if you actually look past it, if you actually look past the one scene or the other couple scenes where Fat Albert says he may be here, but he's not that here, and pointing to his heart or some shit, what we got is an actual nuanced look at neurodivergence in the school system. A more nuanced look than a lot of things have portrayed these days. Like, the closest thing that we've gotten recently that properly portrays something like this is either that one episode of The Proud Family where it was confirmed that BB has autism, and when they get him tested and when they learn that he's autistic, Oscar has to learn to come to grips that his child isn't stupid, he's just different, and he has to learn to accept that. But that episode still ended with the whole, oh, autismos have superpowers nonsense. That, or something like Mary and Max, which had honestly one of the greatest portrayals of Asperger's syndrome that I have ever seen in film. There's also that one character in Arthur, but honestly, I think Fat Albert clears it. Since while the kid portrayed in that episode of Arthur does exhibit autistic tendencies that do exist in certain individuals with autism, I feel like the message that they were trying to portray, they portrayed it a little weird. Like, me personally, I'm sick of the whole autism is like having a superpower, or autism is like you're living in another planet nonsense. I understand that it's the closest metaphor that people may have when it comes to portraying autism, but at the same time, I feel like it could be potentially harmful depending on how it's done. Arthur didn't do it harmfully, but I don't think it did it tastefully. Ironically, Fat Albert might have the most tasteful depiction of autism in the last 50 years. I do not have a clever intro for Fat Albert, but you can call me Crit.